Dialectical behavior therapy was developed by Marsha Linehan at the University of Washington in the late 1970s. So at the time, Marsha Linehan was using cognitive behavioral therapy to help clients who were suicidal and clients who were self-harming. And so what Dr. Linehan knew from the behavioral perspective is that people could learn new behaviors, and changing how they act could have a top-down effect on altering their emotions. And so the development of DBT was really motivated by the challenges that Dr. Linehan faced when she was treating individuals who met that criteria for borderline personality disorder. So these clients, they presented with a high suicide risk. There was severe emotion dysregulation. There was difficulty maintaining therapeutic engagement. And so Marsha Linehan recognized that people who were suicidal have tried to change their behaviors, but they were still feeling suicidal. And thus, really, the only way to begin to facilitate change was to acknowledge that their behaviors made sense given their situation. So I just want to repeat that because I think that's really important. So acknowledging that their behaviors made sense given their situation. So rather than telling people, no, you just shouldn't feel this way. No, you just shouldn't be suicidal, right? Actually saying, well, yeah, that would make sense given everything that you're feeling, everything that you've been through, why you might have these, suicidal ideations, why you have these overwhelming urges to self-harm. And so this is really where this idea of DBT started to stem from. And we'll see it's that idea of balancing acceptance with change. Once I accept where I'm at, then I can start to facilitate that change. It was originally developed for chronically suicidal clients and clients who were diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. And the first population that was really studied with DBT was women who met the criteria for borderline personality disorder. So there is a lot of research out there supporting how DBT is a very effective treatment modality for clients who meet the criteria for borderline personality disorder. That being said, like I said, since then, there has been a lot of research done, and there's a lot more resources available depending upon, the population of clients that you work with. So just in case I forget to highlight it later, because it's on my brain now, so we'll talk about it now. When you are looking at taking DBT from this training into your clinical work, do not feel like you have to go and recreate the wheel. I did provide a resource list, so you didn't have to dig through the whole entire PowerPoint to find any resources. But the resource list, certainly it's not every single DBT book out there, but I think it's a good place to start. Just provides a lot of different material that you could start to look at if you're more interested in DBT. And then if you have clients, specifically, let's say you work with kids or adolescents or clients who meet the criteria for bipolar disorder or PTSD, there's a lot of different material out there for each of those mental health diagnoses and even beyond that. So certainly spend some time doing a little bit of research. So, I lost my words there. So you don't feel too overwhelmed as you start to step into all of the DBT work as well. I will tell you, though, Marsha Linehan really created an amazing package set of skills that can really help people who are struggling with emotion dysregulation. And what I found is that using that as my foundation and then pulling in other material has been really effective for my clients. So I'm not sure if you're super familiar with this, but years upon years ago, and I remember because I was in the field actually when this story came out, and it was really game-changing. And so I wanted to share it here because I also use this as a teaching point for clients, and I'll talk about that in a second. But at the age of 17, Marsha Linehan actually was, she went inpatient. She was kept in a seclusion room. She had cuts all over her body. She had cigarette burns. She had these never-ending urges to die and to hurt herself. And at the time, so this was about early 1960s, borderline personality disorder was not yet a diagnosis. I believe that's because it became a diagnosis with the DSM-3. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's the one it did. And so pre that time. So she was actually diagnosed with schizophrenia, and she was really heavily medicated. She even had ECT as well when she was hospitalized. And so she was hospitalized for just, maybe off and on, or I can't remember if it was an extended period of time, but, for about over the course of like 2 years. And in 1967, she had an epiphany while she was praying, and that eventually led to her going to graduate school and her doing research and the clinical work, and really the foundational work of DBT began from there. And so this is a direct quote from Marsha Linehan. "I honestly didn't realize at the time that I was dealing with myself, but I suppose it is true that I developed a therapy that provides the things I needed for so many years and never got." So I don't know if I put this one, and forgive me if I didn't, because I wanted to remember to. I might not have. Marsha Linehan came out with a memoir a couple of years ago. It's called Building a Life Worth Living, and really fantastic. I think it is a great read. If you're looking more to understanding her experiences. I will also say, if you're really, looking at understanding the experiences of somebody who has lived with borderline personality disorder, there's another really great book, also a memoir, called The Buddha and the Borderline. Also one of my most favorite books. I think as clinicians, so often we have our clinical hat on because we're sitting in the chair and we're trying to help our clients. So this idea of reading memoirs and just kind of sitting with what somebody was going through, not having to worry about us offering up any sort of clinical interventions, it can really be very powerful for us. Sometimes I think it can really help to, reignite that spark that we have that got us into the field. Where I use this story with clients is this. So when struggling with a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder, or when a client is really struggling with severe emotion dysregulation, even if they don't meet the criteria for borderline personality disorder, when clinically appropriate, I really do find it helpful to share Marsha Linehan's experience. And the reason why is when I'm talking with clients about the work of DBT and how it can be helpful to them, now that Marsha Linehan has disclosed that these were her experiences and here's where she came from, it is so beneficial for clients, because I'm saying not just here is a clinical modality, but I'm saying here is a clinical modality from somebody else that also struggled with pervasive emotion dysregulation, that also had these urges to self-harm, or these urges, or suicidal ideations, or whatever it might be. And I think that there's a lot of power in that. I think that knowing that, wait a second, the person who created this is somebody who also had similar experiences to me. I will tell you, you know what I should say? I don't just think there's a lot of power in that. I know there's a lot of power in that. The reason why is, like I said, I remember I was in the field actively working with a full caseload when Marsha Linehan, when this article came out, when she disclosed that. And I remember so many clients coming in and feeling like just so much less stigmatized, feeling so much less alone, feeling normalized. It was validating for clients. And so I still find that to be very true. And so I wanted to share that with you, because I think it can be a really good teaching point to help clients recognize, how beneficial DBT can be for them. So DBT, there's a lot of research out there. I did not, in our short amount of time, I love the clinical stuff. Don't get me wrong. I love the research as well. Love it, love it, love it. But I was like, let's focus on the clinical stuff. But I at least wanted to give you a slide just to give you an idea of what is out there. This is not even completely like an exhaustive list, but DBT has been found to be effective in working with borderline personality disorder, suicidal adolescents and college students, PTSD as a result of childhood sexual abuse, eating disorders comorbid with substance abuse, drug dependence comorbid with borderline personality disorder, eating disorders, depression, anxiety, ADHD, bipolar disorder, OCD, self-harming behaviors, and substance use disorders as well. A couple things to highlight when using DBT with eating disorders: emotion regulation skills are really beneficial. So if that is your client population, I really encourage you to look at those skills. But certainly those are very helpful when working with clients who have eating disorders. And when you're working with clients who have substance use disorders and you're looking at integrating DBT, there's a lot of really great, very substance use specific material that you're able to find. And so I certainly encourage you to look for that as well. I will say one thing, and I don't have a link for it, but I do want to let you know it exists because I just thought it was so cool when I found it a couple years ago, is that somebody had taken the 12 steps and they had actually taken all of the DBT skills and they had put those with the various corresponding steps. And I thought that that was just really a fascinating way to conceptualize the different skills that clients could benefit from. DBT is also really super beneficial for children and for adolescents as well. So, sorry, I was trying to hold off on taking some water, but that was not a good idea. Give me just 1 second. When you are using DBT with kids, the biggest thing that you'll find is that depending upon the age, so we're talking about kids like under the age of 12, there's not a group component to it. So DBT is done in an individual setting, but what there is, which I love, is there's this guardian or parental component that really, I think, really brings people into counseling. So sometimes some of the kiddos I've worked with have had some challenging parents or guardians. And this is really, I find, a great way to integrate them into work, really, with their kids, through this lens of this model. And, you know, these clients that I work with want to see a shift in their children. They want to see a shift in how their children cope with difficult emotions. And so I find DBT is helpful to get that buy-in. With adolescents, you can certainly do DBT individually. You can also do groups as well. And a lot of places also do include a family component when they're doing DBT with adolescents too.